Welcome to Contributor Appreciation. I am doing this solo today, but let's still have a kick-ass time. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. This is my Contributor Appreciation show. Typically, this is on Sunday, but I was unconscious all of Sunday because I had been up for the 2 prior days. My body eventually conks out. So nevertheless, I am having it today. Mrs. Thomas don't feel all that well today, so I'm going to run this solo. Contributor Appreciation is basically the show where I answer your questions. And if there aren't that many questions, I, for the most part, just put on a show and allow the audience to interact back and forth over this course of multiple stories for maybe at 1 hour and a half or 2 hours. What we do is we try to allow patrons to basically engage. Patreon, just for people who don't know, is basically a platform that allows independent creators to have foreknowledge of the amount that they're getting month per month. Meaning, if you enjoy somebody who does what we do, YouTube is somewhat treacherous territory, and so Patreon, or for that matter, PayPal, those things allow the independent creator to basically continue to create, not limited by YouTube, or not limited by basically YouTube or the YouTube's algorithm. I appreciate you guys allowing me to do this particular content, and so we try to give at the very least one show a week where patrons can engage a little bit more. That said, it's not just patrons. It's also people who give on multiple platforms or in multiple ways. But that's what this is. That's what this show is. So I have several begging, interesting segments that I kind of want to run through today. And of course, I'm going to be taking your super chats and your comments, and let's have some fun. Let's start off on a good note, a funny note. I saw this video and I laughed my ass off when I saw this video. And before we start, we have a super chat. Blaze one if you got one. Gladys Lopez. Blaze one indeed. That always makes the show that much better. Makes it that much better. Bob Ramirez. Corona butt from not getting out enough. Yeah, Bob. Well, believe it or not, Bob, I've been able to keep my weight down despite the fact not necessarily going out the house. So far, so good. But I am sick of being here, and I've been staring at my photos deeply and intensely, really wanting to get out of the house. So I want to start here. Independence Day. When Independence Day came out, Independence Day was the shit. Basically, Earth is being attacked. Now, there are problems with Independence Day. I mean, if you have a ship that's a fourth or quarter of the size of the moon, and you move that ship, let's say 75% closer to Earth than the moon, then it will be, for all intents and purposes, like moving the moon beside the Earth. Meaning that those aliens don't really have to do anything. They don't have to bombard Earth at all. If they just sit right there, the tidal waves and the forces and stresses on Earth in and of itself will basically destroy life on this planet. But nevertheless, they wanted to get it done rather quickly, and so they went through the process that they went through. I have a hard time believing that somebody or a species can travel intergalactic space, but then get beat by a few guys with a computer. Why do we believe that their computer systems interact in the way that those computer systems interact? Why do we believe that those systems are electronic in nature? For all we know, they could be using light or some other process. I guess I'm making the point that it's ludicrous to believe that the ones and zeros that we use as a basis of our software, and that the logic of our computers would understand in any way the logic of another species to which we know nothing about. So yes, it's full of shit. Nevertheless, it was a good movie if you didn't necessarily think about it too hard. So there's a scene where the president is basically making his speech. Pullman is making a speech. And this is like this kind of rousing, this is our Independence Day. But look what somebody did to this video. This is entirely hilarious. This is entirely hilarious. I don't see Trump giving that speech at all, or at the very least, that speech is not going to be that way. It's going to be badly worded, very tiny words that are going to be repeated over and over and over again throughout the course of like a 3-minute speech. But whatever. It's funny. It's funny. And I like starting it off with something funny. Going to something else that's funny, but in a sad way, more like cognitive dissonance. way. We have the Democratic Party and we have lefties in the Democratic Party. Now, the lefties in the Democratic Party, for whatever reason, I don't think they quite understand that this is their moment if they really want to get anything accomplished. Yes, it's possible they will be ignored because for the last 40 years, they've basically kowtowed to the party. And because you've basically habituated that behavior, the party basically expects you to continue with the same behavior. Yes, that behavior does not get you the political wins that you want. Yes, if you continue in that behavior, it would ensure that you will continue to be marginalized and not get those political wins, meaning from the standpoint of policy. But nevertheless, they still have that perspective that lefties, for whatever reason, owe the Democratic Party their vote, despite the fact that lefties are basically somewhat separate and distinct from the party. You have fundamentally philosophical differences in regards to what government should do and the policies that should be expressed in regards to our basic starting point. But those are drastically different from the party. Just because they may be a little bit more different than the Republican Party doesn't necessarily mean that they are in any way something that can be achievable in the Democratic Party. And this kind of gets to my point. If you were a member of the Green Party and you were backing all of the policies from the Green Party, it doesn't really matter if it's a Democrat or a Republican. You are in a different party and you don't necessarily back the two other parties. The Green Party is your choice. I'm making a point that lefties need to start looking at this in similar ways. They've coalesced into the Democratic Party for so long that despite not getting the policy wins that they've wanted for the last 40 years, and despite right now having the most popular policy of Medicare for all that they've ever had, in regards to what they're supporting, meaning of all of the policies that are on the table that are popular, Medicare for all gets 88% Democratic support. And you still can't get that policy. If you can't get that policy in the middle of a pandemic, what is wrong with your political process? I think that's a very straightforward question that needs to be answered. The one question that lefties need to be asking constantly, meaning every time you talk to the Democrat, just basically ask, do you honestly believe, how do you justify being willing to allow Trump to win as opposed to accepting political concessions, for example, a policy that has 88% support? Understand what I mean. If indeed Donald Trump is the apocalypse, if indeed Donald Trump eats babies and kicks puppies, if indeed Donald Trump is going to be the end of the world and we can't afford to have that person to win the office, well, isn't the onus in some part on the Democratic Party to find ways in order to win? And one of the ways that will enhance your chances of winning, especially from the standpoint of getting lefties or getting these people who are under the age of 34, getting rid of student debt, universal debt relief, but also Medicare for all. And if you're not willing to support those, you need to explain to me why it is more important to not support concessions that could give you the presidency as opposed to allowing Trump to win and not support those items. That needs to be explained because it's a hard justification for me that a policy that gets 88% Democratic support and the Democratic Party doesn't back, be it in Congress or be it the guy who's running. That needs to be explained. Lefties should be continuously asking that question, whether you're in Congress or whether you're outside of Congress. And it should be very basic. I am not supporting anybody that doesn't support Medicare for all and eliminating student debt. The Democratic Party needs to explain to me why it's more important to not support those policies as opposed to accepting policies with drastic amounts of support in order to beat Trump. Why is it more important to not give concessions? Now, the reality of it is more important to not give concessions. If Joe Biden loses, then Joe Biden loses. Joe Biden wasn't selected because he can win. Joe Biden was selected because he could stop Sanders. There's a difference in those things. If he just so happens to win after that, of course, great, they'll accept it. But all intents and purposes, they are not entirely harmed by Joe Biden losing, meaning the upper echelon of the party, the established order, the thought bubble of the Democratic Party itself, the brain trust. These guys are rich. They're not adversely affected in this way. Yes, the party members, the people who are out in public and who basically back the party, those people will be hurt. Those people don't want Trump to win. But again, those people were sold a bill of goods and engaged in the electoral process, not entirely understanding that the Democratic Party's point was to stop Sanders. And now you're stuck with somebody who is not up to snuff. They can barely get out a coherent sentence. It's not for us to put Biden in office. It's not for us at all. And basically the issue that these guys are having is that they want to get lefty support without giving anything in return. That's where all of the problem begins and ends. We want this support, but we don't want to offer you anything, even policies that have drastic amounts of support. That question needs to be answered. It just does. Whether that question is asked to Biden, Jayapal, Sanders, whoever gets the opportunity to ask these guys that question needs to be answered. Because you are basically telling us that it is so important to not give concessions. Now, the reason it's important to not give concessions has everything to do with this notion that the moment that you give concessions once, it shows a display of power by a group that was basically weaker for the last 40, 50 years. It's you acknowledging that this particular group has a certain amount of weight and leverage in the political process that forced you to give them something that you otherwise didn't want to give. It's in part emasculating, especially from the standpoint of the established order of that party, to have to do something like that. By the same token, if indeed they had any interest in winning, your leverage could be there, but the catch becomes what's more important, giving concessions or winning. I would make the point that winning is more important. Also, without the left being an organized front where they can basically make that point of you accept Medicare for all, expansion of elimination of student debt, or you lose. If lefties were organized around that basic point to the tune of millions, then you would have much more pressure on your political system to try to get those ideas accomplished. If Congress was backing those policies, or at the very least you had congressional members that was continuously asking that question, is it really more important to not give concessions as opposed to lose to Trump? The beauty of the argument is basically any person that's rational, that agrees with that particular policy, fully understands, hey, that's a good point. Why don't you support a policy that 88% of Democrats back in the Democratic Party, as opposed to not? Who are your constituents, if indeed not us? Meaning if we are saying 88%, and you're saying, yeah, we're not going to back that, who are you actually representing that doesn't want that policy? Who are you representing? Those questions need to be engaged and asked honestly, because if I'm right, the Democratic Party doesn't back this stuff, in part because of the money that goes into their pockets from these industries, or for that matter, the money that can be used against them from these industries. You could have billions of dollars leveled at the party. Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, many of these guys know that and don't necessarily want to touch that rail, especially since the way they're running the race doesn't allow them to actually be authentic and honest regarding policy, nor does the public trust them in that sense. I want to show a few examples of this. And what I mean when I say lefties need to be able to ask that question to some degree forcefully, especially on questions of, are your supporters going to back Biden? Or if you're talking about Medicare for all, this is the time to press. I understand it feels like you're in disarray. I understand that it feels like all of these people are out of whack and all over the place. But if you're in Congress, this is your chance. If you're a lefty, whether Sanders is with you or not, this is your chance. Stand under the banner of Medicare for all. It has 88% support, and argue, if you want my vote, you got to support this policy. But again, the issue is those concessions make it very clear that lefties have developed a new backbone or new power, and that is not necessarily something they want to legitimize by giving in to concessions, even if that means losing to Trump. That's why the concessions issue is so contentious. The moment that you give anything, because again, politics is about leverage. The moment that you give anything, you are basically forced to give it. You didn't give it because you were happy about giving it, which means that it puts a new norm in regards to the way lefties negotiate with the party itself. That's not wanted. The wild part is a level of cognitive dissonance that these guys are exhibiting and trying to get elected. Every time there's an election, they get real lefty about it. It's like, oh, we're going to be real lefties when we have no power to implement what we're going to do. So a Democratic Party implements a $3 trillion bill, cuts back on the amount of money of student debt forgiveness They were going to give $10,000 to each student. They pulled back on that because they said it was too expensive to do. Then they added COBRA, which was basically a giveaway to the insurance companies, as opposed to Medicare for All, something that gets overwhelming, almost unanimity regarding support. Listen to Elizabeth Warren try to go after Donald Trump. Now, tell me what's wrong with this statement. Cognitive dissonance within the first 15 seconds. Watch. You'll see what I mean. It'll jump out at you.
The Postal Service is a joke.
91% of Americans disagree with you, and that's Democrats and Republicans. The Postal Service is the most popular government agency, and it's written right there in the Constitution. Our founding fathers believed that moving goods and services and ideas shouldn't be limited by what state you live in. Rural or urban, you can receive and send mail at the same.
Now, Warren is not wrong here regarding the Postal Service. The Postal Service is dramatically popular. The moment that right-wingers are able to destroy the Postal Service, rates for your other postal needs will be jacked up. The fact that the Postal Service is not entirely run on this notion of profit allows for the rates to be lower, which forces the rates down of the other private businesses, which is the reason why they want to get rid of the Postal Service. They want to be able to take over those routes and increase the amount of money that they are earning. The Postal Office should have been defended over the course of the last Democratic administrations, but basically it was just apathy towards it while the Republicans were taking pop shots at it. So I agree with Warren that the Postal Service should be protected. I would argue that those Postal Service workers should go on strike immediately. You are under attack. Your government is not protecting you. Your government hasn't protected you for years. You, at this point, have to take your power into your own hands. And I don't say this lightly. I say this more so because I don't necessarily see a way out under a Republican administration or being made whole in a Democratic administration where you are protected and insulated from the whims of Congress in this way. But that's a secondary point. Very early on, first 10 seconds, play it again. Listen to what Warren says. What's wrong with this statement?
The Postal Service is a joke.
91% of Americans disagree with you.
Now, why is Warren telling us that 91% of Americans disagree with her? Disagree with Trump? She's basically making the argument that, look, the overwhelming majority of the American public disagrees with you. You're in a political space. And as a political space, you're in that office to do and enact the will of your constituency and of your public. Whether they're Democrat, Republican, or independent, the overwhelming majority of the country agrees, leave the Postal Service alone. They may not entirely understand how the Republican Party has been attacking it, but leave the Postal Service alone. But understand her logic here, meaning why this argument works. The argument works because she's using this notion of popularity. We're in a political space where popularity goes along with, in a schoolboy philosophical way, the policies that you should or should not enact. If the public is not on board for you making concentration camps, then you probably shouldn't make concentration camps. Now, in this case, her point is you are basically attacking something that the public unanimously supports. Basically unanimously supports. Yes. But if you make that argument, if you make the argument that you should not do X because the overwhelming majority of the public support it, can't you make the same argument? And doesn't that same argument means you should do Y because the public support it? Meaning, if you're telling me that Donald Trump shouldn't take down the post office because the overwhelming majority of Americans back it, then doesn't the same thing hold true for the Democratic Party regarding Medicare for all and expansion of student debt? I've made this point before. 88% of Democrats back Medicare for all. 88%. I don't know any policy that has 88% support. Maybe the post office, but 88%. 68% of independents. 68% of independents. 69% of all Americans. But basically, this is Democratic Party, Democratic voters, 88%. If Elizabeth Warren is right, the Postal Service gets 91% support. At 88% Democratic support, how does she argue that Donald Trump should not take down the Postal Service by the same token, can't understand how weird it is that after making that argument, her party and the party that she represents don't support Medicare for all. How strange is that? The same thing is true for student debt. If you look at what the polling is for getting rid of student debt, 58% of registered voters said they would support a proposal to basically make public schools and universities and trade schools tuition free. The same group also said they were back eliminating existing student debt. 72% of Democratic voters said they are in favor of making higher education tuition free. 72%. What did the Democratic Party do with numbers like this? Instead of actually getting rid of tuition and their showpiece that was supposed to show what they represent, they basically went through and said, oh, that's too expensive, and cut away at the number of people that could get access to that policy. How can you tell me, straight face, that 91% of people back the Postal Service, or Donald Trump shouldn't get rid of the Postal Service because the majority of the public support it? And I point out, well, the majority of the public also supports Medicare for all, not to mention the overwhelming majority of Democrats, and the majority of the public also supports student elimination of student debt and public universities being free. What's your excuse? And if you don't do those policies, who are you representing? Who? How is that not a legitimate question? When you have policies that are this popular regarding the entirety of the country, meaning we won the argument. When we started on this particular journey back in 2016, and I know people have been pushed for this longer, but the breakthrough was Sanders making this argument about Medicare for all. It had nowhere near the levels of support that it has now. It just went higher and higher and higher as the other people threw up their healthcare ideas that paled in comparison to the real thing. We're in the middle of a pandemic. The number spiked that much higher. And in the context, or in the middle of a pandemic where 30 million people have lost their jobs, the Democratic Party is pushing COBRA. You need to explain to me how that is legitimate. Listen to this. Beating Man Sanders.
Let's talk.
That's what I'm going to start calling him. Beating Man Bernie. Sanders is on Sunday talk shows, and he's asked about his supporters. Now, I want you to hear the second part of this, because I want you to understand why this line of reasoning doesn't work, and the line of argument that should be used right now with Sanders, Jay Paul, and everybody else that's supposedly in the Congressional Progressive Caucus. If indeed policy is the main agenda, Sanders at this point just looks like a beaten man. And in looking like a beaten man, he doesn't necessarily have it in him. Let's hear him anyway.
About the campaign. Your former campaign manager, Jeff Weaver, put out a memo this week where he warned that Vice President Biden is falling far short with your supporters, the supporters who supported you during the primary campaign that he's going to need in November. Is he right about that? And what does the Vice President have to do about it?
Look, I think at the end of the day, the vast majority of the people who voted for me, who supported me, will understand and do understand that Donald Trump is the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country.
Just to reiterate, this is a least worst argument that Sanders is making. This is not an affirmative argument for Joe Biden. This is basically Donald Trump is going to eat babies and kick puppies, and he's going to punch a mama in the face, and he's going to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what this is. And by definition, because Trump is so bad, then Biden, by definition, is least worse. The catch here is the least worth argument only really makes sense in a really narrow focused way. When you start to scale out and look at your elections over the context of time, you realize that by having no accountability, because you've always looked at elections in this narrow focus, your political process has gone further and further and further to the right as cash got more ensconced in that political system. After all, if you're willing to pick any random blue where any blue would do, then you have lost all accountability. There are some times where candidates need to lose if those candidates don't necessarily live up to very basic guidelines of what it means to be a Democrat. Meaning, if you don't have any integrity in regards to what your party represents, then you basically accept anything. You become tribal and relative to basically whatever the Republican Party is. You've allowed cash to be the thing to push your political system without having any level of stick-to-itiveness regarding what you represent and what you stand for, because you were always cowed into voting for whatever random Democrat came up. Again, not because of who they were, but entirely because of who they weren't. This is doubly so for African Americans who vote to keep the boogeyman out of office. This needs to fundamentally change if we are indeed going to get anything accomplished. This level of backing any random person has allowed us to be in this situation, whether Sanders realizes it or not, that any blue will do stuff weakens Joe Biden, because you're trying to get Joe Biden elected without offering and receiving anything in return. The platform is trash. The Taskforce are trash. All of those things are basically a way to con lefties into believing that they got something, a face-saving maneuver. It's not for something that's real and legitimate. It's a time waster entirely to save face. If you want Medicare for all accomplished, if you want expansion of Social Security accomplished, if you want the elimination of student debt accomplished, then it behooves you to stand under those policies and be unmoved. The majority of the population is on your side with those policies. The overwhelming majority of Democrats are on your side with those policies. If the Democratic Party doesn't want to accept them, then maybe the Democratic Party shouldn't win. If they can't live up to very basic, fundamental ideals in regards to standardization of policy, then it gets across how broken your political system is in regards to dealing with what the public actually wants. Not just the public, what the party wants. And if indeed it is broken in that sense, then we need to stop playing the charade. And we need to function outside of the political space and pressure the political space, as opposed to just giving your support to any random hack that in no way is going to get through the ideas and the agenda that you want. I am making the very basic point that there is a reason why your political system has grown tone deaf, and any blue or random blue, any blue would do, is in large part why. No accountability has basically allowed your system to get the way it is. The consequences of an election go beyond just that election. It goes beyond just those two people or who wins or loses that race. It also goes into the political consequences going forward. What's expected going forward? Who's advantaged or disadvantaged by that particular person being in that office? Because we're not all equal in regards to how we are advantaged or disadvantaged politically. I'm making the point that in a larger context, your political system has taken an axe and has basically ossified because of this very basic policy of being willing to accept any random Democrat, regardless of what that Democrat is, without any level of standards associated with that Democrat. That needs to stop. Sanders and this least worse argument doesn't work. Biden is not least worse. Over the context of time, Biden is not least worse.
He's a pathological liar. He's a racist and a sexist, a homophobe, etc. And I think at the end of the day, they will be voting for Joe Biden. But I think what Joe is going to have to do, and he's beginning to move in that direction, is to say to those working class people, say to those young people, say to those minorities, listen, I understand your situation. You know, I understand that you are graduating college with tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars in debt. I understand that you don't have any health insurance. I understand that you're working at a job that is paying $12 an hour and you can't get by on that. We got to raise that minimum wage to a living wage. You know, I understand that you're concerned about not only the pandemic, but you're concerned.
I don't understand. Is it that Sanders is just bad at politics, where he just doesn't understand how politics works? Has he also been habituated into this idea of just voting over and over again in the Democratic Party, regardless of who is running in the race? I don't understand. Jayapal is doing something similar, by the way. Sanders wrote the Medicare for All bill in the Senate. Jayapal wrote it in the House. Jayapal, we should be guaranteeing more people access to affordable health care instead of guaranteeing people more subsidies to insurance companies. That's basically COBRA payments. Now, here's the thing. Yes, incrementally, people should have access to health care. But whether they can pay for it and the bills that are hounding them, the debt, the bankruptcy, the not going to the doctor because they're scared of a bill, something that my wife has done and both of us have health insurance. Like those things are pressing issues. It's easy for somebody to make this point of, hey, we need to have this kind of access to care. That's somewhat of a throwaway line. The real bare bones reality of it is, are you going to push for those policies? Now, J. Paul has pushed for those policies. By the same token, this tweet misses the mark big time. Just like Sanders' comment misses the mark big time. And by the way, when Sanders was asked something about expanding healthcare, listen to what he said.
And
choosing your doctor.
Look, Ron, you have access right now. Go out and get a really great health insurance program. Oh, you can't do it because you can't afford it. All right? That's what he's saying. Access to what? You want to buy one of Donald Trump's mansions? You have access to do that as well. Oh, you can't afford $5 million for a house? Sorry. Access doesn't mean a damn thing.
Access doesn't mean a damn thing. And I would tell you this, as somebody who, by the time I was 17, had so many medical bills, meaning when I developed kidney failure, by the time I was 17, my mom worked at a job, wasn't necessarily making a huge amount of cash. My mom, we were always poor. And despite having health insurance, if you're going to the doctor over and over and over again, then you have to go to a specialist, and then you have to get a surgery. The bills, regardless of having health care, it doesn't necessarily, or having insurance, it doesn't necessarily ameliorate the bills, especially if a person gets legitimately ill. What you should be saying here, both of you, what you should be saying here is asking the question. When Stephanopoulos asked Sanders, what Sanders should have said was, look, George, I think the question is whether or not the Democratic Party is going to back policies that these, like my supporters, accept. And if they're not, then they need to answer the question of why is it so important to not give concessions as opposed to beating Trump. That's what J. Paul should be tweeting. That's what Bernie Sanders should be saying. That's what AOC should be saying. All of these lefties should be saying the exact same thing. It should be on the same page in the same script. Why is it so important to not give concessions to policies that have 88% Democratic support and over 75% Democratic support, as opposed to beating Trump? You would think that the concessions for policies that Democrats are overwhelmingly in favor of would be easy if you were backing that constituency. If you indeed want those people's support, you should back these policies. That should be the line of conversation. That should be the line of argument. That should be the only thing you say if they're asking you if your supporters are going to back Biden. You should answer that with a question. That's where you should go. I mean, the issue and the onus is not on your supporters to put Joe Biden in that office. The issue is for Joe Biden to go get those votes. Those voters have different political priorities than Joe Biden. So Joe Biden needs to basically lean and get into their political priorities and give them something that is good and legitimate enough to get their support. You're not going to get everybody, but you will start shaving off the number of people who are diametrically opposed to supporting one Joe Biden. That's how you get those people. And that's politics. That doesn't hurt the Democratic Party. It only hurts the Democratic Party if they're not willing to support a policy that 88% of people support. But you need to be willing to risk that, and you need to be willing to put them on the spot. That doesn't stop you from endorsing the party, but it does make it very clear and make it in a pointed way. Why are you not willing to give concessions to win this race against a man who you say is ending the world? That's what you should be asking. That's what I think all lefties should be asking, especially dealing with vote shammers who are going to be out like maggots very, very soon if they're not out already. Look, my very basic point is that voting for Biden is not the least worst. Voting for Biden is not the lesser of the two evils, especially when you look at this over the course of time and you see the party process basically move further and further and further to the right. And the Democratic Party was instrumental in that process of moving. They took that cash. They were willing to slide in the direction that the cash incentivizes. By the same token, it is for us to make the case and to push, but not after they get elected, but to threaten before they get elected. That is where your power lies. You have no power after they get in office. Sanders here has no power to motivate Biden to anything. J. Paul has no power to motivate Joe Biden to anything. The only way you push your political leaders and people who are in your party is to be willing to be pointed in your criticism in one case, but also willing to play politics in regards to trying to push for what you want and function within the context of a group and making that political case known. If Sanders, as high profile as he is, makes that argument of why is it so important to not give political concessions if that indeed is the thing that beat Joe Biden, Jay Paul, same thing. You will get buzz around that question, and it would bring a large focus around why doesn't the party support a policy that is 88% support. Now the catch becomes Sanders would need to risk the party not doing that, and he is entirely unwilling to push for these policies in earnest, and that is the biggest failure of Sanders. Right now, I have no expectation of Sanders doing it all, so don't misunderstand me, but I do have an expectation of him actually wanting those policies accomplished and trying to take the most brutal and direct route to doing so. Well, the most brutal and direct route is saying something that is just infinitely true. These many people support this policy and you're not backing it. Why? So, let's see. Charles Calvin. Me and you, independent ticket, Calvin and Thomas 2020. You mean Thomas and Calvin? Thomas and Calvin. Michael Wims. Your thoughts on my patron suggestion? Possible? Let's see. What is your patron suggestion? Put it in, Michael Wims, and I'll read it here. So an interesting story came out today. Well, let's show this one first. This one pissed me off. So let's show this one first. Do you remember the killing of Ahmaud Arbery? He was basically jogging, and while he was jogging, several good old boys in a pickup truck pulled up and basically murdered him after chasing him for, apparently, we've just found out, around 4 minutes. This was disgusting, to put it mildly. Understand, a human being, an American citizen, goes out for a jog. And while that person is out for a jog, a few good old boys decide that they want to interrogate him. They are no fucking better than him. He has every bit as much right to be where he is, doing what he's doing as any other American, regardless of their race and color. You're either an American or not. The rules apply to everyone or they don't. And in this particular case, these guys believed, because they had more force and they had pickup trucks, that it was perfectly okay and legitimate to stop a person and to murder a person if that person didn't stop and engage in their inquisition. Fucking amazing. And yet, this is where we are. Just so you can see the video of what happened, this was the video footage. And I'm giving a warning, it's on the left. This angered me greatly. This is basically the dash cam. They followed him, chased him down with a truck. You're going to see a scuffle and a fight, and they eventually murder him. Multiple guns. None of this had to happen. They did this. They started this. And then they claimed self-defense after they chased him down and murdered him. These guys are being charged with murder. I'll believe it when I see it. Trayvon Martin, a similar case, and that asshole got off entirely and was basically let out to terrorize the other people in the communities. I couldn't imagine being his mom or one of his relatives. God, man, I swear I would have paid somebody to knock him off like nobody's business. I couldn't imagine losing a kid like that. I couldn't imagine losing my dog, let alone my kid. So I feel for his family in this, and I feel for his family in this. The notion that in 2020, you can't believe that your kid will come out the house, when your kid goes out the house, that there's a percentage that he won't come back. Not for anything that he was doing wrong per se, but entirely because the people who are out there that believe they have some level of standing to do shit like this, and even going to the point of lethal force to get their way. A way, by the way, that has no legal justification at all. New information has come out on this. So the sister of the person that hunted him down and murdered him apparently took a video or took a picture and put it on Snapchat. Yes. After they chased him down and murdered him, she took a picture of the dead body and put it on Snapchat. Lindsay McMichael, 30, admitting to posting unedited image of blood-soaked Arbery lying on the street in Brunswick, Georgia on Snapchat, but said she meant no harm. She meant no harm. How fucking insensitive do you have to be? You're a disgusting person. Your family members murdered a man. Literally, in real terms, hunted a man down and murdered him. Broad daylight on the streets of your city. And not being entirely perturbed by this, and not being distraught by the fact that your family members have just murdered somebody, you then go out and take a picture of the person that they murdered. And you see nothing wrong with this. You don't see how degrading this is, not just for you, but also the person who's lying there for what you and your family members did. That's utterly astonishing that you believe that this is okay. I had no nefarious or malicious intent. That's worse, believe it or not. How unfucking empathetic can you be? And I suppose that the fact that your family members just murdered a man gets across to some degree the level of your thinking also. Meaning, if you are not perturbed by what your family members just did, then that tells me something about who you are as a person and as an individual to do some shit like this. You're taking a photo of a newly murdered person. That's fucking phenomenal. Like, that's astonishing. The thing is, I'm a huge fan of true crime. I listen to 4 podcasts a week. I'm constantly watching this sort of thing. She's not getting it. Like, this is the mentality of this family. And that's matters. If you're looking for some idea of what is in the head of these people, the dehumanization of this human being goes not just to the people who murdered him, but to the person who co-signed that murder by basically taking a picture of the dead body, taking a picture of the crime, if you want to say it that way. Astonishing. Lindsay McMahon's father and brother are charged with murder in the Arbery February 23rd shooting death. Again, I'll believe it when I see him prosecuted. And until I see him prosecuted, I don't believe it. Apparently, new information has been released also that, based on various landmarks, that this took place over 4 minutes. Meaning they were basically chasing him for 4 minutes. He was a hunted man running like a slave in Georgia, trying to get away from these. Look, I'll put it to you this way. People who look at human beings as equal don't do this. Regardless of whether it's spoken or not, people who regard other people as human beings and as equals don't behave in this way. So, yeah, these good old boys who thought it was perfectly okay to murder a black man, running that black man down the street for 4 minutes until they finally get to the point where they can murder him, in which case the sister comes out and snaps photos of the body that her family members just murdered. You're a fucking disgusting family. Utterly, entirely disgusting family. Can't believe that. Can't believe that. And yeah, and then you're going to hear people say all lives matter. Look, in an abstract sense, yeah, all lives matter. But we are very clear at what we're talking about here when we make the point that people are being murdered and it doesn't necessarily seem that there are consequences. It took massive outrage on social media for them to do anything about these people who murdered that man. And if the roles were reversed and there was a black man or blacks killing a white person like that, they would have locked their ass up on the spot. There wouldn't have been this social media nonsense. They would have locked their ass up on the spot. Even the Trayvon Martin case, or the case where they went through and shot the person through their window, or a no-knock warrant where they basically kick down the door and murder the person who's in the room and then arrest the person that shot back. You kick down a door, you basically get rid of any pretense. You are fair game. If you're issuing a no-knock warrant where you're breaking into somebody's house and that person is not aware that you're there and they're a legal gun owner, it is fair game for them to shoot you and kill you for invading their house. That would have been a better outcome as opposed to you killing that woman in that bed. That's just being honest. If there was somebody who was going to get shot, the people who were the aggressors in that situation should have gotten shot, not the people who were laying in bed doing nothing wrong. I guess I'm making the point that whether this was under Trump, this was also taking place under Obama, so it's not like something is uniquely different about Trump in this case. But there needs to be consequences to this stuff. I mean, this kind of goes back to the thing in politics where if there are no consequences politically, then you basically incentivize a behavior to take place, especially if there are benefits to that behavior, despite how wrong that behavior is. If you are basically allowing cops and at this point random hicks to go out and murder the people in their community, then that's a problem. That's to put it mildly. That is an astonishing problem, especially from the standpoint of African Americans. Now, I've made the point before that my issue is class. I think a lot of the stuff boiled down to issues of class, but the problem is that's not an issue of class. That's an issue of race. And there are issues of race that are unique to people of color that I do think that those people of color, especially seeing as they vote to the tune of 90% Democrat for any random Democrat, yeah, they should push for their needs to be met. Especially in the case of the COVID-19 thing where they're dying at 2.3 times higher rate than whites, or in cases like this where these guys are basically willing to murder somebody in broad daylight, and it takes outrage for the prosecution to do their fucking job and bring these people in on charges. This is disgusting. I'm sorry, this is utterly and entirely disgusting. I can't believe that happened. Like the no-knock warrant stuff, like that stuff is so over the top in regards to what you would have in any kind of sane, rational society. And yet, here we are. The judge issues a warrant to not knock, just to basically break somebody's door down. And then they're shocked to shit that the person who's there will respond in force. I have a shotgun. I would shoot anybody that is breaking down that door. I would have no issue with it at all. From the standpoint of defending my family, it is fair game. Whether those people are cops, whether those people are robbers, in that sense, they are effectively the exact same thing because I have no fucking clue who's breaking down my door. Same thing applies in that case. But in this very specific case where they chase him down, that's different. I'm just, the other one, Breonna, I can't think of the last name. It's aggravating. I don't overly cover these stories because I get really aggravated at these stories. When I see something like this happening, it's not like the person is in Georgia. It's basically like this is some family member of mine that is also held to the same potential that has been expressed there. Also with this extra caveat that the government may turn a blind eye to this atrocious behavior, in which case they look like they were going to do anyway. It's fucking insane. Let's move on to Trump. I have a few stories for Trump. Now, let's see. Progressive media. Oh, okay. Yeah. I'll talk about that, Mike. Let me get to Trump first, and I'll bounce back to you, Michael. Donald Trump did a press conference today, and Donald Trump said something that was shocking. Like, it was entirely shocking. Now, first, let's go to Nancy Pelosi, because Nancy Pelosi takes the opportunity to basically put a knife in Donald Trump and does so, I gotta be honest, in a funny fucking way. And then I'm gonna bounce to Trump. Now, if you remember, in the UK, well, you may not know this, but Bojo got really ill from COVID-19. Now, Bojo starts thinking that it's his weight that made him more susceptible to the illness. And he starts to go on this crusade on weight. Now, listen to Nancy Pelosi talk about Donald Trump. And listen to this very specific dig that Nancy Pelosi makes. But she coats it in this idea that I'm just looking out for his health, man. That's all I'm
doing. The president is concerned. He's our president, and I would rather he not be taking something that has not been approved by the scientists, especially in his age group and in his, shall we say, weight group, what is morbidly obese, they say. So I think it was As far as the president.
Nancy Pelosi called him morbidly obese, but she coded in this, yeah, the president, he needs to be careful taking stuff. I mean, especially for something in his age group and, his weight group, him being morbidly obese. Morbidly obese. It's the morbid part that makes that funny. Now, what Nancy Pelosi is talking about has to do with Donald Trump dropping this specific bombshell today. Listen to this. This is mind-blowing.
News on the hydroxy, and I say, hey, you know the expression I've used, John? What do you have to lose? Okay, what do you have to lose? So I have been taking it for about a week and a half.
Every day?
At some point, every day. I take a pill every day. At some point, I'll stop. What I'd like to do is I'd like to have the cure and or the vaccine, and that'll happen, I think, very soon.
And you've had no symptoms, sir?
Zero symptoms. No, I haven't had any symptoms. No, I test every couple of days. They want to test me, for obvious reasons. I mean, I am the president, so they want to test me. I don't want to be tested, but they want to test me. So every couple of days I get tested, and I've shown always negative, right? Negative. Is that the term you use for this, right? Negative. Totally negative. No symptoms, no nothing.
Donald Trump dropped the bombshell today that he has been taking what is it? How do you pronounce it? Hydroxychloroquine? Now, this is a malaria drug. Now, the reason why it's mind-blowing that he's taking this, I'm trying to get the specific name of the drug. I think it's like hydroxychloroquine. Yeah, hydroxychloroquine. The reason this is mind-blowing is because this drug doesn't work. Donald Trump has been talking this drug up for the past God knows how long, and this drug doesn't work. They've done multiple studies on this. A study came out like yesterday that made the point that this drug does not work. And not just not work, has side effects that have shown itself to be more onerous than the symptoms prior, meaning either heart issues or some people have died as a result of this. Meaning Donald Trump pushing this particular medication, people started taking this medication, and some people died as a result of taking this medication with no positive benefits from the standpoint of stopping COVID-19. And Donald Trump is saying he's taking this. Now, we don't know if Donald Trump is taking this. He may just be saying this, but it's possible that he is. There's no way to know. His doctors wrote a letter, basically, look, I don't know how you justify giving this to anybody if you're a doctor. So I don't know if this was some decision that Trump made and his doctor just kind of co-signed. I don't know if Donald Trump is just making this up. I have no idea. I've even heard that Donald Trump has a fiduciary relationship with the drug. It's unclear to me. But right here, the large observational studies, each involving around 1,400 patients in New York, recently found no benefit from hydroxychloroquine. Two new ones published Thursday in the medical journal of BMJ reached the same conclusion. One, by the French researchers, gave 84 hospitalized patients the drug and 97 others with usual care. There was no difference in the odds of death, need for intensive care, or developing serious illness. The other study from China was stricter tests. 150 adults hospitalized for mild or moderate illness and randomly assigned to get hydroxychloroquine or usual care. The drug made no difference in the rates of clearing the virus or the time of release of symptoms, and they brought more side effects. In April, another study, the National Institute of Health launched the study testing hydroxychloroquine versus a placebo drug in 500 hospitalized COVID-19 patients. Last week, NIH announced another study to see if hydroxychloroquine plus azithromycin can prevent hospitalization or death of people with mild to moderate illness. About 2,000 U.S. adults with confirmed coronavirus infections and symptoms such as fever, cough, or shortness of breath will get the drug and placebo pills. Now, despite this drug surging, the studies have shown no positive benefits from this drug. The preponderance of the studies, no positive benefit from this drug. And Donald Trump has just announced that he is taking this particular experimental drug that experiments have said has no positive benefits. So Nancy Pelosi, feigning care for the president, making the point that his morbid obesity and taking this kind of drug could be resulting in Donald Trump, could result in Donald Trump's demise or illness. And she's like, yeah, I'm concerned about that. Look, this is a horrible idea. I understand Donald Trump has been pushing this drug, fair enough. But if you're looking at this from any level of science, where you're thinking to yourself, okay, I want to take the drug that actually works, this wouldn't be it. This is more this kind of weird ideological stuff. And again, we don't know if Trump is taking this as a flat fact, but still, it's weird. Progressive media organizing grassroots movement, right? Maggie Smith. Let's see. What did you say, Maggie? It will never be approved because it's not patentable. Yeah, I mean, but whether it's approved or not, I guess I'm just making the basic point that Donald Trump is taking a drug that has not shown any positive benefits, but has shown people having additional side effects or potentially death as a result. That's such a weird thing to admit, even if it's true. But nevertheless, here he is. I'm taking this drug that doesn't work. Are you having any side effects, sir? No, I'm not. I expect a vaccine, but I'm taking this drug every day. And another story on Trump, by the way, or kind of on Trump. Bill Barr gave a mind-blowing speech today. I have to be honest, I appreciated the speech because I don't trust what took place in 2016 from the Obama administration or from the intelligence services, meaning something happened that propagated this Russiagate hysteria and myth, and we need to get to the bottom of it because they tried to take down a president. I've said before, if they would have found anything in the Mueller case on Trump, or if Mueller was tempted to try to get Trump out that office and raise something to the level of importance in a way that he deprioritized, Mueller didn't do that. Comey deprioritized Hillary Clinton's information, but in the same way that Comey deprioritized the information of Hillary Clinton that would have gotten her prosecuted, well, Donald Trump would have been taken out that office. That would have been a coup attempt. They didn't have evidence that anything was even taken from the DNC. Julian Roger Stone is sitting in prison right now for not being a link between Julian Assange and the Trump administration. All of this stuff has just basically fallen apart. The Flynn investigation, the agents basically pounced on him, having already read the notes or read the transcript from Kislyak. They still were asking questions on something in order to entrap him on something that was perfectly legal. Like, this case has fallen apart completely. John Durham is the one that is looking in criminal investigation into the origins of Russiagate. Bill Barr and some of the files that were released recently, by DNI chief, made the point that from the standpoint of Flynn's case, the Obama administration knew, meaning there was unmasking of the conversation between Flynn and Kislyak. And with that unmasking, it made it clear and available that the Obama administration in a January 5th meeting were talking about and discussing Flynn. The Obama administration also took steps to basically have Comey and I think her name is Yates to function not in the interest of the Trump administration, but basically function with command from the previous administration. So instead of having this belief that there's some kind of Russia hysteria, they don't tell Trump that. They basically give Trump, or Comey goes to Trump and gives him the most salacious details of the PP document or dossier. And then that's immediately leaked to CNN that there was a meeting between Trump and Comey about the PP dossier, which gave a kickoff from the standpoint of CNN with the Russiagate hysteria that Donald Trump got peed on. Like, all of this stuff needs to be investigated. The leaks and everything else that was a part of our system. Was the CIA a part of this? Was the intelligence services a part of this? Did the intelligence services allow an administration to spy on the incoming administration? I hope you understand what I mean by this. If roles were reversed and George Bush was coming into office, or George Bush was, and Obama was in office. No, I'm sorry. Obama was coming into office and George Bush basically came up with some idea that allowed him to spy on the Obama administration. Would people be okay with that? Will people look at that and say, yeah, nothing to see here, folks. That wasn't a big deal. There's no way George Bush would have did that. Of course not. If it was Trump, no one would ever believe that Donald Trump wouldn't do that. Many people would believe that Trump would do that. I find it extremely weird that they think the Obama administration wouldn't. You had an administration coming in that the Democratic Party looked at as the end of the world. And you're trying to tell me that they wouldn't be politically incentivized to try to wrap him or ensnare him into something that will basically wrap him in knots over the course of his presidency to try to keep what they consider to be harm to a minimum? Yeah, of course they would. Would the intelligence services aid in this? Potentially, especially given that Strzok and McCabe and some of these other guys had a clear bias against Trump. I don't understand why people look at this and just all of a sudden give Obama a pass. You shouldn't. That administration should also be fair game for investigation every bit as much as Trump was fair game for the Trump and Russia stuff. Bill Barr guts these people who are hoping for him to investigate Donald Trump. Investigate Barack Obama. Now, he does this in two clips. The first one, entirely agree with. The intelligence services should not be used as a political weapon. Period. They shouldn't. And in the last administration, they were.
To comment on what the president or Vice President Biden, for that matter, say in connection with their campaigns, but I will address the role of the Department of Justice. I think, as you know, I've commented since I have been Attorney General and even during my confirmation hearings that over the past few decades, there have been increasing attempts to use the criminal justice system as a political weapon. The legal tactic has been to gin up allegations of criminality by one's political opponents based on the flimsiest of legal theories. This is not a good development. This is not good for our political life, and it's not good for the criminal justice system. And as long as I'm Attorney General, the criminal justice system will not be used for partisan political ends.
Clearly, he's talking about 2016 Obamagate, but he's also talking about the propensity of Obama and that last administration behaving that way to incentivize Republicans to behave in the exact same way. So for Trump to be like, well, look, they did that to me. Well, I want to investigate them. I want to investigate Obama and Biden. That's where this investigation needs to go. Well, Durham is looking for credibility in this investigation. Barr chose Durham because he was looking for credibility in the investigation. He knows that Trump put Bill Barr in. So if Bill Barr has too much influence in the investigation, well, they would say that Barr is basically directing an investigation into Biden and Obama or whoever. Barr, at this point, gave it to Durham. Durham is, from my understanding, somewhat of a trustworthy figure in this case. Now, the catch becomes Durham is doing a criminal investigation, and Barr has basically said, look, the Justice Department will not be used for political whims. Now, this goes against people who are pushing for Obamagate. This also goes for people who are basically saying Biden needs to be investigated. And yeah, it is pointing directly back to 2016. If Barr didn't make it clear what he was talking about, he goes further.
Not every abuse of power, no matter how outrageous, is necessarily a federal crime. Now, as to President Obama and Vice President Biden, whatever their level of involvement, based on the information I have today, I don't expect Mr. Durham's work will lead to a criminal investigation of either man. Our concern over potential criminality is focused on others.
Now, the immediate question that jumps to mind is, who are those others? Clapper? Brennan? Are there some agents like McCabe or Strzok? Who is he investigating that he is considering, or that Durham is considering criminal charges against? Now, the key point that Barr made there is just because an action is hideous doesn't make it illegal. Meaning just because a president, or for that matter, a vice president, abuses power, doesn't mean that that abuse of power is illegal. There's a difference in those things. It could be hideous. It could be atrocious. It could be politically motivated. It could be incentivized to basically try to ding your opponent in any way you can ding your opponent. It could be utterly atrocious for our political system. By the same token, it may not be illegal. That's his point. As bad as what it seemed that Obama and Biden might have done, from what he understands, it may not be illegal. And because it may not be illegal, this is not necessarily where the investigation is going. That's Barr's point. That's Barr's point. Barr is basically saying no to the Obamagate. Now, here's the catch, though. Be very clear. Durham is doing a criminal investigation. Durham is clearly looking at certain people that may be at fault in some way of instigating the Obama, how this stuff started in regards to the Trump and Russia conspiracy theory. And just because he said Obama and Biden is not the focus doesn't necessarily mean they wouldn't necessarily snap into focus if Durham starts to find information that shows that they were in some way responsible in some criminal capacity. So, you know, for whatever incentives that he have to not necessarily turn this into this kind of political weapon, well, allowing Durham to basically do this investigation, it depends on what Durham finds, I suppose. I suppose there will be a hedge against Durham bringing charges against Obama or Biden for something they might have done, despite allegations that may be brought up. You just heard him. Just because it may be horrible doesn't make it illegal. And the same applies to Trump. Now, Trump, after hearing this, responds in this way. Now, Trump doesn't like this because Trump's basic point is they would have did it to me. Meaning, if roles were reversed, they would have did it to me. And we know they would have did it to them because Joe Biden has basically said, yeah, if they're investigating Trump, hands off. Elizabeth Warren has even made those type of statements that they were going to be looking and investigating this particular administration. Now, they wouldn't hold Bush responsible at all. They argued that this is bad for our country to basically impeach another president, even if that president was responsible for getting 1 million Iraqis killed. In Trump's case, they don't have that predilection. They are perfectly willing to go after Trump. So I don't necessarily think Trump is wrong here saying they would have did it to me. Let's hear Trump.
President, first a question for you. Attorney General Barr says he is unlikely to have any criminal investigation of either Barack Obama or Joe Biden. You've been talking about what you call the greatest political crime in American history. What do you think of Mr. Barr's decision here?
Well, I think if it was me, they would do it. I think for them, maybe they're not going to. I don't know. I'm surprised because Obama knew everything that was happening. I don't think Obama knows where he is in a lot of ways. I saw his statements the other day, and I think that, frankly, they weren't very good. That's President Obama. As far as Biden's concerned, I can't tell you. Only he knows what he knows. I don't think he knows too much. But I think Obama and Biden knew about it. They were participants, but so I'm a little surprised by that statement. I don't think he said it quite the way you said it. I think he said, as of this moment, I guess. But if it was me, I guarantee they'd be going after me. In his case, they're not. So I think it's just a continuation of a double standard. I'm surprised by it. But that's where it is. And I don't know what he said about the others. You have to understand, I was coming into this room as that statement was being made. So I don't know exactly.
He said, we cannot allow this process, the legal process, to be hijacked by efforts to drum up criminal investigations of either candidate. He seemed to be suggesting...
Well, I think you'd have to ask him what that means, because I'm in no position to tell you that. I've stayed away from it. I'm relying on the Attorney General to do the job. And so I don't know exactly what he said because I was in this room.
Clearly, he's not happy with that. Clearly, he is not happy with that at all. And look, whatever you want to think of Trump, I agree with him. They would do it to him in a heartbeat. The animosity that they've ginned up in this kind of Trump derangement syndrome, yes, they would have done this to Trump in a heartbeat. They would have went after Trump whole hog. They wouldn't have had one issue at all doing it. And so Trump making the point that, look, they would have done it to me. They would have investigated me. Now, he is also right that Barr said they're not the objects at this moment. But I think, again, the key thing that Barr made the point of, that just because actions are hideous doesn't make it illegal. So basically using a Russian hysteria thing in order to hide the fact that they cheated Sanders, but also to give them legal grounds, fig leaf, to spy on the Trump administration. This is a fig leaf, just like going into Syria using the Iraq war vote. Well, same thing. Fig leaf, political fig leaf. This allows me to now spy on the other administration. I mean, that's where we are, right? And so I don't think Barr is looking at Obama and Biden in this. And like I said, there's somewhat of a disincentive for him to look at Obama and Biden because the last thing he wants to do is make this a political issue. That's fascinating press conference that Barr had. Utterly fascinating. So let's say, Refi00. HCQ and zinc, it works. North Italy gives it COVID-19 free. India is mass producing it for 100 plus countries. I'll send you the Twitter. Yes, please do. Please do. Let's see, we have one more. That's MI. Look up peak propensity in YouTube. You're not a doctor. Nope, I'm not. Peak propensity. Oh, I'm sorry. Peak prosperity is video. Coronavirus is quote unquote this generation's polio, roughly at 1454. Now, look up peak prosperity on YouTube. You're not a doctor. Again, never said I was a doctor. Peak prosperity is, okay, coronavirus is this generation's polio, roughly at 1454. Okay, I don't know what I said that gave the impression that I was a doctor, where I gave the impression that I thought I was a doctor. I was trying to put that out. I don't think I've ever said that. If I've ever said anything on COVID-19, I mean, my issue with COVID, look, I agree with 70% of the population that say the issue is the disease itself and the virus. Now, the catch here is the moment that you tell people, we need you to stay at home because we don't want you to spread this virus. Well, at that point, you have a problem that you need to deal with. Those people had jobs. Those people had businesses. And those things are going to go belly up if those people are going to be out of work for all that time. Not to mention, for the millions of people that aren't working, you have to supply their income. You need to pay that. That's the job of government, a rational government. Now, our government cared more about economic concerns as opposed to dealing with the material concerns of our population. So you have people who, despite being eligible for unemployment, still not getting that unemployment, large numbers, on top of people who basically lost their jobs and are in this kind of thing where they're not getting anything, not to mention also lost their health care because they can't afford COBRA payments. We need to deal with that. Like, it's astonishing that we've basically allowed, I was reading a thing today, 42% of the jobs that have been lost are not coming back. 42%. God, that number is so high. New York, Andrew Cuomo, chest thumping. Over 20-something thousand deaths. I mean, this stuff is government policy, so it's not really a doctor issue. I mean, the doctors, for the most part, make the argument that social distancing works. And in the context of that social distancing, logically, it would work. If you have a mass number of people, those people have more susceptibility to getting the disease just because you have more numbers that have the opportunity to bounce around. You lessen that number, you lessen the density, and you have less propensity. But that's not a doctor thing. I mean, I don't think I've ever said anything that made you think I was a doctor. But I could be wrong. If I did get that impression, I apologize. Let's see. There was one more. Refi00. Rayalt versus Fauci about HCQ pros and cons in front of Senate. Interesting. Yeah, send me that. HCQ. I wasn't taking HCQ. I was taking what is it called? So there are certain drugs that help you to make your dreams more vivid. Now, this helps when you're trying to get into lucid dreaming or OBEs from a dream state. But it basically allows you to wake up in the dream state. Now, I can't think of the exact name of the drug. I know it was zinc. I think it was it was zinc. And it was another transmitter or something. But whatever that particular vitamin or whatever that mineral was, it helped with this notion of stirring you to wakefulness, but not necessarily waking you up. And so it would stir you to the point of being awake in your dreams. Now, this is one of those things, it's a double-edged sword. It could be somewhat of a dark dream that you might be awake in, or it could be one that's, a little bit more, less so. At the point where you get to the point where you can control the dream state, it doesn't necessarily matter, it helps. Reading studies is more complicated than newspaper summaries. No, that's true, I agree. But I don't think I said anything wrong. I haven't put it this way. I haven't said anything that goes against the preponderance of the evidence in this case. Shrooms. Now, I've never tried shrooms. Well, that's not true. When I was in Amsterdam, I tried shrooms, but I didn't get a good effect from shrooms. Like, I got lost, and I think I got lost. After I got lost, it kicked in a different mindset. At that point, I was trying to find my way back to my hotel. It wasn't the enjoyable thing at that point anymore. There was another one that I tried, sativa dividorium, and it looks like pot, but it's a hallucinogen. I mean, in real terms, quick acting, but also a short lifespan. I think it lasted maybe 5 minutes. But basically, I was sitting on my bed. I had my chessboard on my bed. I could hear my heart beating, and it felt like I had merged into the bed itself, and the chessboard had merged into my leg, and that the universe itself was beating with like a bias in a particular direction. And I was sitting there kind of like feeling my way in it. It's a really weird and heady experience. I didn't take much of it because I didn't necessarily entirely know the effect, so I was taking a minor amount. When I wanted to take it again, I couldn't find it anymore. No, hydroxychloroquine. Oh, I see. In front of Senate, pros versus cons. I see. Refi 00. Well, I mean, Refi, I've given you all of these studies that make the point that says the stuff doesn't work. At that point, the onus is not on me. That's not me pretending to be a doctor. That's me kind of just saying, look, study after study after study. I read one today, literally today, that kind of made the exact same point. One of the largest studies that it doesn't work. I mean, I get Trump is pushing this, but the science is not necessarily there. But fair enough. We can agree to disagree, I suppose. Now, Michael Williams, let's talk about your case. So Michael Williams is a patron of mine, energetic subscriber, and I appreciate you, Michael Williams. Progressive media organizing grassroots movement. So I thought about this. Initially, I had my wife cut videos, and I would pay her a decent sum to do that. And so that was her way of helping out with the channel. Not to mention she helps during the shows 12 to 2, Political Misfits. So that was her job of sorts. Now, after a while, I realized that cutting the videos didn't matter. When you cut the video, it wasn't getting a substantial number more than just the video itself. So it was no point in cutting it because there was nothing to be made out of doing that. And so my thought was, well, look, I have an idea for something that I want you to help me with, that I will pay you basically the exact same amount to just do that. Transfer your duties. What I was telling her is an organization called the New Left. Now, when I call it an organization, that's too strong. It's just basically a policy list. This is what we want. Medicare for all, expansion of Social Security, elimination of student debt. 3 items. Tip of the spear. And with that tip of the spear, how many people supports these policies? I call it the New Left just because you got to call it something. But basically, the only thing it is just policy. And it's an email list and ability to send newsletters and communications to people who back these policies. The goal of it is to create as many people as possible to be in that list of in sync, where there is communications among the people who are in that list. It's not a party. It's not an organization in any real sense. I don't want it to be a party, nor do I want it to be an organization, at least starting off in any real sense. I just want it to grow. My goal is just how many people support these policies. That's it. Just stand with me on policy. I don't care if you're socialist. I don't care if you're Democrat. I don't care if you're a progressive. I don't care if you consider you're a communist, lefty, whatever. I don't care. Do you agree with these three policies? The majority of the public say yay. I don't know how many people will get on it. I don't even know if this will be beneficial or if it would work. But I do want to start somewhere and trying to get a number of people who would be involved in something like this, and by involved, that just means, yes, I agree with these policies. That's just the baseline. My belief is it's possible that this Hail Mary doesn't work. Meaning this notion of trying to get somebody through, meaning like a Sanders or somebody. Sanders could have potentially won. But our Hail Mary, at this point, it's not going to work. And there's nobody else to take that mantle up of Sanders that we're aware of. So at that point, you're back to this notion of creating some kind of movement and bringing people together under some sort of banner. Well, the banner I'm thinking of is not based on political parties, because basically any political party you take is going to antagonize somebody else. I don't want that. I want it to be very specific in regards to this is what we want. Whether or not we have a candidate in that backs all of our policies, or whether or not we can pressure the political process, pressuring the political process is a path. And it's a path that grows with your influence, meaning the more people that you have, the more influence you have into the political space. That's kind of the point of the list. The list is only to get people together, to get a large number of people where you can send out newsletters, you can send out emails, you can have communications where you can communicate. If that grows and organizes into something else, great. But at a very basic, I just want those people under one umbrella. An argument at that point can be made specifically to the group about whether or not they should lump support into one particular person or another. And the group, in some degree, can decide how to give their support in mass. Your support in mass is the thing that tilts a win or loss. And that win or loss is political leverage, that is political credibility, and yes, that is power. You don't have to occupy a square to pressure the square. I do believe, though, that having a large number of people just under this banner policy is where you start. Other lefties shouldn't have any issue with this. Now, it must be understood that if the Hail Mary is not going to work, then you need to get people attuned to the notion that government can do these things. Starting off with three policies makes that point. Again, tip of the spear. And in having that tip of the spear, the moment that you get one thing accomplished, it gets across and incentivizes the public to realize, oh, we can do these things, as opposed to having like a 40-year gap between the government doing big, big things. I know some people think Obamacare was big. Obamacare was basically a giveaway to the health insurance companies. That's what it was. It was a Republican plan. You get a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, Democratic Congress, and the best that you get is a Republican plan. So yes, I give Obamacare credit for breaking the consciousness of the nation in regards to what was possible for healthcare, but modest, extremely, extremely modest. Let's not get it twisted. I am absolutely open to working with other YouTubers or whatever. I don't know why they will be against just standing under the banner of policy. If you're trying to create a new party, right off the bat, you're going to, I don't want to say antagonize, but you have people who are wed to their tribes. And a new party doesn't entirely have the capacity to win immediately. Again, that's still stuck with growing something. I ask for no commitments. The only thing I ask is if you back X, sign up. Now, whether there are other lefty YouTubers, if they're backing that, I have no issue with supporting them. I don't know what the other lefty YouTubers are doing, but I am absolutely open to it, considering that that was basically the group that my wife and I talked about over the past week or so. So I am going to do that website, and she is going to basically manage that particular website. And as we pursue our way, we're going to be thinking of ways to expand it. But what I can do is I can reach out to the other YouTubers to see if they'd be on board for backing basically just policy. And in backing basically policy, to see if we can channel as many people as possible under that particular banner. Meaning eschew political parties. Focus on what matters in regards to policy and be fanatical in your devotion to trying to get those policies accomplished. There's a difference between trying to get a policy accomplished versus shucking and jiving for a party. If you are backing a party that in no way backs your policies, even in the middle of a pandemic with 88% support, I would put to you that you have no chance in getting anything that you want through that party. If when the conditions are like they are now, 30 million people without a job or without insurance, over 30 million people without a job, and the best that they can do is COBRA. Like, that's utterly astonishing. If you can't support Medicare for all now, you're never going to get the support of Medicare for all from Democrats. That's kind of my point when I'm saying your political system is broken. And it's no point in putting up this charade and pretending like you're going to get something out of that political system when they're dramatically against what you want. Standing under this notion of these are the policies we're willing to support. We might not be able to win outright, but we can make you lose. Now, again, this is one of those things that it is up to the Democratic Party to explain why they are not willing to give concessions as opposed to winning the presidency. If lefties had taken that position immediately for the entirety of this particular election, you would have had a far better chance and far more leverage and being able to influence what you want in the political space. But Sanders basically bringing the lefties into this thing and basically capitulating and giving over all leverage and all support to basically whoever was going to win it, decapitated that process from jump. Williams, yes, I'm open to this. I'm open to this. Not asking Pac-Man, no. I was going to ask Dorr, I was going to ask Cal, and I would ask them to ask people who they know and just kind of spread it around in that way. And again, I asked nothing in regards to getting people to do X or Y other than just sign up and being willing to accept newsletters and communications in regards to policy things that are taking place, in regards to how we function in a political space. My hope, in a somewhat emancipatory way, maybe even utopian, is that it does get sufficient numbers where it becomes something, where the people start thinking of themselves as something specific and different. I mean, even if you're a DSA member, what's the inhibition to supporting just policy in this way? It furthers your own aims. I'm making the point that regardless of what the person's party is, Green Party, People's Party, DSA, whatever, if you support these policies, there's nothing that inhibits you from standing under them while still standing with your respective organizations. Now, the conflict may come in the sense of what we recommend in regards to a vote versus what the other political parties may recommend. Fair enough. But from the standpoint of alerting you of various policies and showing a show of force and support for these policies, every progressive should line up and sign their names on that dotted line. That's my thought. That is my thought. Michael Williams, even Khalees and great men don't seek power. They have it thrust upon them. I'll push that on y'all. I'm with y'all. Let's get it done. I mean, Michael, I got to be honest. I don't entirely know how to do this. Bob is an organizer more so than I am. I'm thinking of this as, I think of it this way. In 2016, there was a run for the presidency where Sanders tried to win. In 2020, there was a run for the presidency where Sanders was basically unarmed and went into a punching match where they just kept punching him in the face over and over again. And he wanted to give speeches. This was raw ideological combat that was necessary, but that's not necessarily what we got. Sanders couldn't even call Joe Biden a liar for lying about the civil rights movement, something that Joe Biden had even agreed that he lied about. So that was the level of the politics in this race. After winning the policy argument, though, which Sanders did, because the people agreed with Sanders more than they agreed with Biden, you had a situation where Biden wins a race on electability, and after winning that race, despite losing in every policy discussion, ignores what the public wants. I mean, Obama was running with the TPP while Hillary Clinton was trying to run away from the TPP, even though if she got in office, she would have passed the bill. I'm making the point that the public was entirely against it. He didn't care. Right now, you have a policy that has 88% support. The Democratic Party does not care. You have another one with over 70% support. The Democratic Party does not care. It's like your political instrument has lost all tether to the public itself. Because if indeed your political instrument and the parties that you represent or you push for are supposed to implement the policies that the majority and the party itself believes in, well, this is clear. This is unequivocal in regards to the amount of support. And yet, they don't support those things. I'm making the point that that's proof to you that it's not working. What you want for that party is not working. You're not going to get it. You're in the middle of a pandemic. Every opportunity right now is ripe to get Medicare for all passed. And the Democratic Party is still giving a subsidy and basically a giveaway to health insurance companies. If you're not going to get what you want out of the political process, stop playing that game and draining yourself away from that game and supporting this notion of policy as a movement to leverage and push on that system in the way that you can try to win or lose is the way to go about it, not functioning in it. You would need people that would work with you in the standpoint of in the political space. But hopefully, if it grows, you would have the ability to try to get those people in office. But at the very least, you would have the power to keep some people out and try to compel concessions from those people, holding political grudges when they lie, and in other cases, being able to put a dagger in somebody if they don't meet basic standards. If you want to try to pull your political system back from the brink, if you want to try to reconnect it to some level of accountability in regards to the public, then that's not a magic door. That's literally just holding your political leaders accountable by recognizing that there are times where they need to lose. That's just the way it is. You should divorce yourself from this party politics, tribal politics nonsense. What are your standards? And based on those standards, choose. But that candidate should live up to your standards. And it should be an affirmative case for why the person should be in that office, not this entirely fear-based cowardice of we're trying to keep the monsters at bay. No. This is no longer relative. You are an individual, have a certain standard that you need to live up to if you want to get our support. That standard is basically Medicare for all, expansion of Social Security, and elimination of student debt. My standards aren't fuzzy. I don't like fuzzy language. I'm very specific in regards to what I want regarding for policy. You either accept it or you don't. I don't need a task force for that. You accept it or you don't. That's where I am. What I can do, since I employ my wife, is get her to send out requests to the various people, Cal, Door, and see if they'll send out requests to other people and basically send them the website and let them see if they'll sign people up and see if they'll sign up themselves. Again, it's not a group. It's just, well, I guess it is a group, but I'm calling it the New Left only because I want to be very clear that the definition of the New Left is just policy. That's all it is. This is what we want. This is what we're unwavering on. And from that standpoint, being able to contact millions of people and discuss how we should respond as a group. And again, doesn't matter your party. So that's my thought. That's my thought. That is cool, right, Jordan? Jordan also. Tell me what you think of that, by the way. I mean, personally, I don't see another pathway for the left, especially since the Hail Mary of Bernie Sanders flamed out. But I'm open to ideas. Connect with Jimmy Dore. He's locked into change outside the party and shaking my head. Oh, you're missing the low key DA9 Kalis quote, revisit your Cleon history. Oh, Kalis, today is a good day to die. I need to see the thing. Kalis. Oh, right. Kalis. That's what you're saying. Kalis. All right. Let me see. All right. What was the Kalis quote? Even Kalis said, great men don't seek power. They have it thrust upon them. Yes. Yeah. But that wasn't just Kalis. That was something else too. Like there was something else in our own history that made that quote. It's not that power is being thrust upon us. It's more so that you get tired of having. Look, I don't want to be in politics for 40, 50 years. And the only thing you get is pressure. Oh God, I don't want that. I don't think that's the way it should work. I want to win. And winning requires not necessarily doing the things that basically have lost for the last 40 years. That means you have to do something different. The door that needs to be walked through is you have nowhere else to go. That is the thing that basically have hit you in the knuckles. This narrow pragmatism that is really not that pragmatic at all when you look at it over the course of time. That door is the door that needs to be walked through if anything is to change. And that needs to be walked through with the demand saying, this is what we want. It's no different than any union that balks from a company when they feel that they're not being taken, they're treated fairly. They understand that they are putting a risk by walking off. They also understand that it hurts the company in them doing so. But they're willing to do that and trash it all if they are in a position where they're not going to be treated fairly. It's how you negotiate. It's the way you negotiate. The left, if it's not going to be an organized group, it's not going to have the capacity to even have that demand be heard, let alone being able to have some level of negotiation if they're not able to win and take power. That's why I start off with this notion of we need to grow. And we need to grow in unison under this notion of, at a very basic level, we agree here wholeheartedly and function from there. That's my plan. That's my idea. Ralph Nader made the point that if 20 million people pull themselves out the Democratic Party, you'll get change. Maybe. I think he's right. But the change is going to be somewhat chaotic. Chaotic only in the sense that I think the Democratic Party would tank it. I really don't believe they want to give concessions. And as such, they would fight tooth and nail before they have to give any particular concession and may even be willing to lose, thinking that they can basically try to blame the loss on something else, as opposed to them not being willing to accept something that the overwhelming majority of the party agrees with. Even now, same thing. And speaking of that, Bernie Sanders task forces. So this story is fascinating. And they bury an interesting tidbit in this story that I think should get more press. Wall Street donors still see in Biden's cabinet despite progressive picks. Now, the story basically says, yeah, Biden is, talking this progressive stuff now, but we'll get our cabinet picks. Now, remember, Citigroup chose Obama's cabinet. We found that out through WikiLeaks. In this case, Joe Biden is taking a political tactical maneuver of basically trying to not choose those people at this moment because he doesn't necessarily want to hurt them. He may wait until after he gets elected before filling those cabinet positions, and he may even already have those cabinet positions picked out. So not choosing them now or putting a few lefties or a few people who are supposed to be lefties is just a tactical maneuver in the short term. Also, these task forces, and that's the part that I found the most interesting. So right here, look at what they say, because I think this is perfectly right, but I don't think the person who's writing this understands the entire reason why. So speaking anonymously to Bloomberg, top Wall Street insiders who have been cutting checks to Biden and the Democratic Party establishment figures for decades have begun thinking about what cabinet positions they could score if Biden defeats the president in November. We've been giving you money, buddy. We need to get some of those cabinet positions since we've been giving you so much cash. Last week, campaign unveiled Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force, a coalition dedicated to developing new policies based on both candidates' platform. The move should have raised alarm bells on Wall Street, which overwhelmingly saw Sanders as a threat to the financial stability for corporations and markets. Surprisingly, it didn't. No! Not surprisingly at all. Not surprisingly at all. I love that. The author is like, yes, Biden is having these task forces now. And because Biden is having this task force with Sanders, these people were terrified of Sanders. They thought he was going to bring the end of capitalism. But now they seem to be perfectly okay with these unity task forces. Why? Why do you think they're okay? Question, why do you think Wall Street is not bothered in the least by these task forces that Biden and Bernie have set up? Because they don't matter. Wall Street knows they don't matter. Those task forces don't matter at all. They are optics. It is a political face-saving maneuver. Basically, Sanders is going to invest a lot of his time into a task force that doesn't mean anything in a platform that means even less. And this is going to be the thing that they hold up as some kind of win, even though they don't matter. They don't matter in the least. Wall Street knows this, in which case they don't care about those task forces. They know they're going to get their cabinet picks. They know Biden's policies are going to be in line with their interests. They're good. There's a reason Bloomberg got out the race, or that Bloomberg wanted Joe Biden and was perfectly happy with Biden as opposed to Sanders. Because Biden was going to basically have America and keep it the way that Bloomberg likes it. Bloomberg is funding all of these people up and down ballot. That gives you some idea of the people who are going to be running in those races. And this is why I say it's that much more important for lefties to come together. It really is. I'm tired of the token policies. I'm talking about real policy concessions. And that's not what we're seeing. All right, I'm beginning to drag ass. Let's see. Maggie Smith. And I think, Maggie, you're going to be the last one. It will evolve, Jamal. Maggie, I hope so. I mean, I don't think we can look at this as being a short-term thing. I think it really does have to be long-term. If 2016 and 2020 hasn't told us anything else, our political system is messed up. And as such, these guys are just turning a 10 ear to what the public wants. That needs to change, which means the public needs to be on board for it to change. And there needs to be some kind of organizing principle to get a lot of people who are disparate in their belief sets to get together. We have certain symbols to do that, meaning we have the Constitution, which is a symbol. We have Declaration of Independence, et cetera, et cetera. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All of these things are just symbols that we organize and accrue around. How do you get 300 million people who don't know each other in various parts of the world to basically say we're all Americans? Americans, not real. Constitution, not real. None of those things are real. And yet, here we are with culture and all of this other stuff that we ascribe to ourselves. I guess I'm making the point that idols and the ability of unimaginary things, or the ability to think of imaginary things, has allowed us to organize around each other in ways that go beyond just our local actions and our local upbringing. In this very specific case, what I am asking is for an organizing principle being around. Here are 3 objectives that I want to accomplish. Come with me to accomplish these. That's all. Very basic, very straightforward. And see if it grows. If it grows, it will be something. Jamal, you missed my super chat, did I? Megan Morales. I'm sorry, Megan. Oh, there you are. Connect with American Johnson and his YouTube channel, Non-Complete, and other BreadTube folks. I don't know who. Okay, I'll try. I take these down. I mean, basically, I'll try to send a message and see what they say. I mean, I gotta be honest though, Jimmy Dore doesn't necessarily respond to me. And Jordan responds more often. So I'll try him. I could send to Ron. Yeah, this might work. I mean, we'll just see how many people we can get to back us up on this. Let's see. All right. The People United. Jamal, the model you speak of should have appeal beyond the left, right, Democrat, Republican, front. That's my hope. I mean, that's why I am eschewing parties. No parties. If you want to talk about bringing the country together, in real terms, honestly, not this bullshit political jargon that these guys push, that Obama gave in the graduation speech, or that Joe Biden gave, or that these people talk about. No. Honest terms, bringing the country together. You do that by finding something that the country agrees on, and you implement it. Now, the reason I say that is it allows your country to mend, and having that mend go beyond a party process. It goes into this kind of national movement into getting something accomplished. And in doing so, you allow the public to take a certain degree of power and reconnect your political process to what the public wants. That's how you unify the country. Right now, you give 95% of the income gains to the top 1%, meaning you have 99% of people fighting over 5% of the scraps, despite the fact that those people are entirely necessary in order to produce all of that. You can't get your system back in whack without dealing with the economic inequalities, and not just the economic inequalities, the political tone deafness that the political class has towards the people it's supposed to represent. From our standpoint, I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Libertarian. I don't care what you are. Do you agree with Medicare for all? Yes or no? I know 40-something% of Republicans agrees with this policy. Do you agree with the elimination of student debt? I know that roughly 40-something% of Republicans agree with this policy. Do you agree with the expansion of Social Security? Same thing. So whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or anything in between, join me. I'm not asking, to say, okay, let's take over oil companies. Yes, I want to do that. But no, I'm not saying that. I'm being very specific in what I'm saying I want to accomplish. And I'm making the point that if the public wants to also show their muscle and try to get something accomplished in real terms, then standing under our banner of policy and saying we are not participating in this political system without these policies being on the agenda. And we will vote against anybody who is not accepting these policies, even if that means writing in, let's say, something like Greens or third party. And stick with that. Now, yes, I know people are still going to be tribal in the way they go about politics, and they're going to want their people to win versus otherwise. Fair enough. But at the very basics, the thing that I'm talking about is stand under this guideline of policy and be fanatical about it, even to the point of being not in the context of party, but in the context of policy. That's the way you unify a country, not this kind of partisan politics. At this point, there's so much bad blood that's been developed between the two parties. It's hard to get anything accomplished where those two parties can interact. Not to mention, because the two parties are basically so ensconced in cash, the modest proposals that the Democratic Party put out and the horrendous proposals, to be honest, the horrendous proposals that both of these guys put out, the Democrats are just marginally better on some of them. Well, those things are not in line with what the public wants. So it's not entirely, it makes all the sense in the world that the public will be unhappy with it. Government has 30% approval if it's that high? There's a reason for that. I remember when Congress had 11% approval. That's not magic that's happened. That's because the public understands of the disconnect between what the government does, who the government works for, and the charade that these guys put on, when the public knows that it doesn't work for them. That has to change. Until that changes in a real, authentic way, something that neither of the parties is going to want, because they have been stuck with that level of power without any notion of accountability for so long, they're not going to want to give that up. But until that happens, this notion of unity, I don't think it's anywhere to be found. I could be wrong. But my hope is that the appeal of doing something like this does go beyond just this very basic thing of specific parties. But we'll see. Only thing you do is try, right? Let's see. All right, I'm going to end this because I'm starting to drag ass. Meg Morales, I found your super chat. Thank you for reminding me. Let's see. Yeah, I think I got everyone. All right, guys. I'm going to end this. Like, share, and subscribe. I'm all for shifting the focus to policy. Maggie Smith, yeah, I think that's what has to be done. Jimmy Dore is right on most things. Jimmy Dore is a lot on the right. Yes, he's right on a lot. Yes. Let's see. That makes sense. Excellent color choices on the t-shirts. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Let's see. Twit. I like this channel. Oh, I like the channel The Dark Side of Dr. Seuss. Fair enough. Matthew Wayne, Obama did nothing wrong. I've had somebody tell me that Obama made no mistakes. Obama made no mistakes. Even when he let the homeowners go bust, he made no mistakes. Yeah, I've heard people make that argument. I don't buy into that argument. Dilly y'all 357. Medicare for all is my number one, so sign me up. Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, once we get the website up, I think this is what we're going to try to do. At this point, I'm paying somebody else to do it, so there's a much better chance of it happening with me doing this channel, the other job, and also doing treatments. But I don't know what else to do. When I think of my agency is entirely limited to pulling other people in. So that's what you do, right? Before you can do anything else, what's your first step? What's your second step? What's your third step? And you go from there. If there's going to be any level of success, I would imagine you have to hit certain metrics and certain tasks. But I don't know. We'll see. All right, I'm going to end this here. Like, share, and subscribe.